I often read on social media comments like, you don't need a pattern for that. Why would someone design a pattern for something that basic? Why would you charge for something like that? Anyone with a bit of experience can work it out. Who's going to pay for that pattern? Something that easy and basic that 100 designers have already designed. Well, lots of people do need a pattern for very simple things, and lots of people do want to pay for a pattern, and it doesn't matter if another 100 designers have designed exactly the same kind of thing. They want a pattern from their favorite designer. So today I'm going to talk about some of these things that a lot of knitters and crocheters think you shouldn't need a pattern for, or you shouldn't be charging for a pattern for that. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns. I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website, YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I'm filming this in June, but it probably won't be out till sometime in July, but I don't know exactly when. I'm filming this before I go to Norway for 2 weeks. And while I'm away, I will close my online shop. But if I am back home again, or if you're watching this a little bit later, then do go and check out my online shop, because I do have some yarn at the moment in the reduced section. So I'm away from the end of June till middle of July. So if you're watching this towards the end of July, there may be some yarn left in the reduced section on my website. Also, do check out my workshops at Yarndale at the end of September. Last weekend in September, I'm teaching 3 workshops. I'm not exhibiting this year, but I'm teaching 3 workshops. One's nearly fully booked, I think. I'm also teaching at the Knit and Stitch Show at Alexadra Palace in London in October. Those workshops are available at the moment for booking. I will link everything below. I'm also teaching at the Knit and Stitch Show in Harrogate in November. At the time of filming, those workshops are not yet available for booking, but they may be by the time this video is out. Same with Black Sheep Wools in Warrington in Cheshire. I'm teaching workshops there in September, October and November. At the time of filming, they're not available yet, but I think they're going available later this week. So by the time this video is out, they probably will be available for booking, although they may have already sold out, because they tend to sell out very quickly. Make sure that you sign up to my newsletter and follow me on social media for all the latest news and information about new designs, pattern releases, magazine designs, workshops, events, all that kind of stuff. Everything is below this video. Okay, let's talk about something I see on social media a lot. It's a recurring comment in the Craft Snark subreddit, and probably one of the 2 subreddits. And I frequently see it on social media as well, like Threads and X and all those places. A lot of people think that some things are too simple for anyone to need a pattern for it. And this probably goes for knitters and crocheters. I tend to see more stuff related to knitting because I'm more involved in the knitting community, although now I have started designing again for crochet and teaching crochet workshops again. I need to get more plugged into the crochet side of social media, I think. But you quite often get these comments for simple things like basic vanilla socks. So basic sock patterns to just make a pair of plain socks tend to be called vanilla socks, which is why my 2 basic sock patterns are called creme brulee and creme caramel. If I remember correctly, and it's a while since I've actually looked at them, but my creme brulee one, I think it's the one that's top down, basic sock with heel flap and classic heel turn and gusset and everything. And creme caramel, I think, is the one that's toe up with a classic heel turn, heel flap, gusset, all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for a basic sock pattern, do go and check those out. But also things like basic hats or beanies, simple scarves with an all-over pattern, even basic sweater constructions. Like I've seen people say things like, oh, this person has just released a very basic top-down raglan. There must be 100 other patterns available. Why do people need that? Well, we'll come to that bit in a minute. The thing I want to talk about first is why some people need a pattern for things that you may think is very basic and simple. You may not need a pattern or want a pattern for certain items because you can figure it out. Other people may need a pattern because they lack your experience, or they may want a pattern because they don't want to have to figure it out. Some people don't want to do all the numbers for basic things. They may know that, yes, I can knit for example, let's say a rib scarf. Some people might just think, I have 100 grams of yarn, let's see how long I can make it, and do a basic rib scarf. And they may have a guess roughly how many stitches to cast on, knit a little bit, see if it's wide enough. If it's too wide, rip it back and cast on fewer. If it's too narrow, make it wider and cast on again. Some people don't want to do that experimenting, and they want to just be told what to do, so they would prefer a pattern for even something as simple as a rib scarf. And it may not just be because they lack experience. It may just be that they don't want to waste time figuring it out. And this can go for anything simple. I've designed scarves before, especially when I was a new designer, that just has like an all-over basic lace pattern. That's taken from a stitch dictionary. It's not that difficult to figure out, but some people don't want to have to figure it out. They just want to pick up a pattern and follow it and be fairly guaranteed they're going to get the result they want. When it comes to things like socks and hats, they're a little bit more difficult because you have to make sure that you knit the right size to make it fit. So you have to make sure you knit the right tension and you have the right stitch count for your yarn and tension and needle size, all that kind of stuff. It can be fairly easy to work out if you know how and you have a bit of patience and you don't mind experimenting a bit. But some people don't want to do that. They want to have it all worked out for them, so they can just follow it, and that's just fine. Other people like me don't like following other people's instructions, whether it's recipes for cooking or knitting or anything else. Flat pack instructions, rather just try and figure it out. Whereas some people want step-by-step written down instructions, so they can just follow and be guaranteed that the result is going to be what they want it to be. And others may not have the experience to work it out. You may just be able to cast on and work out how to knit a scarf, but if you haven't knitted a raglan sweater before, trying to work that out can be quite complicated, quite a lot of maths involved. Same thing with a drop shoulder sweater, for example. I probably designed, I put that in quotation marks because I'm not sure there was a lot of design really involved. When I think of design, I think of something you plan and have some rough idea before you start knitting. But I remember knitting very simple things when I was a teenager. The sort of like Benetton stripy jumpers were very popular at the time, but they were also quite expensive. So I remember just buying yarn and knitting stripy tops. Sleeveless tops are very popular. There was one particular style that was very popular among teenagers in the 80s in Norway, and it basically just consisted of a rectangle for the front, a rectangle for the back. I guess we would have knitted something around the edgings. I don't know, can't remember. And you just sewed up here and you sewed up down the side seams, and that was it. And I knitted a few of those. I just figured it out, cast on. If it looked like it was going to be too small, I ripped it out and cast on a few more stitches. But some people don't want to have to figure it out, and they don't want to have to guess, and they just want someone to tell them what to do. You also get comments for something fairly basic, a comment that lots of designers have designed before. Lots of designers have done things like vanilla socks, simple scarves, basic raglan sweaters, basic circle yoke sweaters, basic dropped shoulder sweaters with no patterning or just basic hats or beanies. So lots of people may have designed certain types of patterns that all on the surface look the same, but you may want to get the pattern from a specific designer, or you may not know about all these designers. Not everyone knows about everyone. There's designers that are really, really huge profile, that have a huge following. People like Petite Knit, Stephen West, who in my view probably are two of the most popular designers that are working at the moment. I know who they are. Lots of people I meet know who they are. Lots of people I meet that come to my workshops and things don't know who they are. My mum knows who Petite Knit is because she's knitted a couple of her patterns. But if I say, oh yeah, that's a Petite Knit pattern, she go, who? And so you knitted her pattern last year? And she went, oh, all right. But she wouldn't have a clue who Stephen West was. And I still get lots of people in my workshops regularly who don't know who some of these designers are. And I occasionally come across people on social media that have hundreds of thousands of followers, and I'm like, never heard of this person before. And I feel like I'm the only one who don't know. So not everyone knows everyone, and some people want the pattern from their favorite designer. And a lot of designers want basic patterns for basics that people may want to knit over and over again. I designed my creme caramel and creme brulee sock patterns, basic sock patterns, to go with my workshops initially. And I've also added information in them that make them more user-friendly to people who are new to sock knitting. I've taught loads of knitters how to knit them in my workshops over the years. And I know people who have either bought the pattern many, many years ago and used them over and over again for basic socks, or they've been to one of my workshops and they still use that pattern over and over again for basic socks. And it's their go-to if they just want to knit a basic pair of socks. That's their go-to pattern. And loads of designers want a pattern like that people will return to again and again. Obviously, people just buy the pattern once and then reuse it. So we don't necessarily make much money from that, but it is quite nice when people come back to your pattern again and again and again. And if somebody else is looking for a pattern or similar thing, say you go to a knitting group and you're knitting one of my sock patterns, and somebody says, oh, which pattern are you knitting? And you say, oh, it's Creme Brulee by Anniken and Allis. It's a really good basic sock pattern. I've been using it for years. Then that person may come and buy their own copy of that pattern. So designers still gain, even if some people may just want basic patterns they can knit over and over again. It then also means that they may share it with other people they know who may also buy it. So lots of designers want patterns for basic things that people are going to knit a lot of. 2-3 years ago, something like that, I decided to knit Simon a hat. I'd seen a few people knit sort of top down or one piece double layer hats. I have never been that successful at hats before then. I tried to knit Simon hats a couple of times and he was never that happy with the fit, but I decided that was a challenge and I thought I would try and knit a double layer hat because they look more like a lot of the hats you buy commercially in shops, I think. So I decided 3 years, probably close to 3 years ago now, I would do it. And the first hat that came to mind was Isolde Teague's Musselburgh hat. I would imagine thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of knitters have knitted that over the years. I've seen it in loads of YouTube videos. One particular YouTuber I was watching regularly at the time seemed to always have one on the needles. So I immediately thought, well, should I just go and buy the pattern? I don't have to think about it. My problem is I don't really like following other people's patterns. So I didn't buy it because I thought, well, then I'm going to have to read it and make an effort to follow it and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, it's not that difficult. I can work it out. I know I'm a designer, so for me, it's fairly easy to work out. And when I say it's easy, I can work it out, I don't mean that if you need a pattern for something like that means that you're not experienced enough, or I don't think you're good enough. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that, I'm a designer. I'm used to figuring these things out. And I felt like it'd be easier and quicker for me to knit it, just experiment off the top of my head, rather than buy a pattern and have to read somebody else's pattern, because I don't like following written instructions for anything, really. So I cast on, I knitted it, and Simon liked it. I finished it actually when we were on the way to Norway, when I was sitting in the departure lounge at Stansted Airport, because I remember finishing it and him trying it on. And he was happy with it, and he still wears it now all winter. And since then, I knitted myself a couple, 2, 3, can't remember. I knitted one each for my daughters. I'm not sure how much they're actually wearing them. I knitted another one for Simon this winter, and then at some point I thought, I'm knitting quite a lot of these, and when I talk about it in my YouTube video, I will usually say something like, oh, this is like similar to Isolde Teague's Musselburgh hat. I've never seen a copy of her pattern. I've seen loads of pictures of it and loads of YouTubers talk about it, but I've never actually seen the actual pattern. So I just want to make that clear. So I have not copied her because I don't know how her pattern is written. I will say her pattern is more comprehensive than mine because I believe it comes in various yarn weights, whereas mine is just for 4-ply yarn, because that's the only version I've knitted so far. So I decided to design my own, write up the pattern. I already had the pattern kind of in my head, but I thought, well, I might as well write it up. Wrote it up, I got it tech edited, I got some photographs done, and I've sold enough copies of it for that to be worth my while. And because it's a pattern that's sort of like a timeless pattern, that every winter, if I talk about it, few people will probably buy it. So it's a basic pattern that I'm happy to have in my collection that doesn't really go out of date or doesn't go out of style, if you like. So I did, when I first released it, I was worried about somebody accusing me of copying the Musselburgh hat, but loads of other designers have exactly the same hat. I've seen other big designers with similar kind of double layer, 2-layer hats that's constructed in the same way. So you start at one end, you increase, you get the full circumference, you knit the section straight, and then you decrease at the end, then you just tuck one end inside the other. Most designers have hats like that. So I thought, well, I know I haven't seen Isolde's pattern, so I know I haven't copied her. But yeah, I was a bit worried when I first released it. Somebody's going to say, well, you're copying so-and-so, but that hasn't happened. You may not need a pattern for a specific thing, or you may know tens, 50, hundreds of designers who've already designed something similar to that. But other people may not have heard of those designers and they may want a pattern. Also, some people are very loyal to designers they like. They may have bought my patterns before and be happy to buy my patterns, whereas they may not want to buy somebody else's patterns because they're not sure how they're written and that kind of thing. So I think there is value for designers in designing basic stuff that some people think that we shouldn't be charging for, or that other people have designed already. So why would we design that? Not everything you design has to be new and groundbreaking and innovative and amazing. Even designers like Stephen West, who's fairly known for being quite innovative and designing some quite out of the ordinary, shall I say, patterns. Even he has some basics, I think. Doesn't he? I'm pretty sure he does. Also, when people post on social media or on Reddit, oh, why do people need a pattern for X? Why do people need a pattern for something that's simple? Why do people want another pattern for that when there's gazillion already on Ravelry or whatever? People will read that who want a pattern for that. Now, if you are the kind of person who have the experience to be able to figure some of these things out, but you just prefer to buy a pattern and follow it because you may have a fairly demanding life, demanding job, and when you sit down to knit, you just want to relax and pick up your knitting and get going. You may be fine reading that and think, oh, just go away. But some people, especially those who lack the experience to work it out or don't instinctively know how to do a particular thing, may read that and think, oh, so that means I'm not experienced. You know, people can be knitting for decades and not have knitted a top-down hat or have knitted a sock. So they can be quite experienced, but they may not be experienced in sock knitting because they've never knitted a sock. And they may want a pattern for the first few times they've knitted a sock. They may always want a pattern when they knit a sock. Some people may want a pattern for the first few times, and then once they've learned a construction method, they might be happy to experiment and do their own thing. Whereas some people will always want to follow a pattern. And it can be a bit demoralizing, I think, for those people who don't have the experience to know how to do something, to read that they are supposed to know how to do something. Some people write like, why would you need a pattern for that? If you do need a pattern for that because you don't have the experience yet, that can be a little bit demoralizing to read. Oh, so people are judging me because I need a pattern to knit a basic sock. I mean, I think a basic sock is actually quite complex. So I think most people would need a pattern to knit a basic sock for the first few times. Other simple things may be things like a hat is probably a little bit easier to work out if you know how increases and decreases work, or like a scarf that just has one stitch pattern. That's probably a bit easier to work out. I think actually do think most people need a sock pattern for the first few times. And some people will always want a sock pattern. My mum always follows the sock pattern when she knits socks, and she must have knitted hundreds of socks over her lifetime. It may have been at some point when she was younger that she didn't need a pattern, that she could just churn them out, but now she always follows the pattern. And when I'm like, you need a pattern for that? Don't you have the rough idea in your head? She's like, no, I want to follow a pattern. Whereas I would rather just cast on and wing it. But that might just be the difference between our personalities as well. Let me know what you think. Do you get annoyed when you read things like, why would you need a pattern for that? Why somebody designed something that's simple? Or have reading that made you feel inferior? Like, okay, so maybe I shouldn't need a pattern to knit something easy or that other people consider easy. It's what I'm saying, triggering. Let me know in the comments. And what other kind of things that you don't need a pattern for and that you still prefer to follow a pattern for, even though it may be something that other people consider to be easy and they should need a pattern for. Let me know in the comments your views on this. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing and go down to the section below this video to the notes and check out all my upcoming workshops this autumn at Yarndale, Blacksheep Knit and Stitch Show in London and Knit and Stitch Show in Harrogate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.